Welcome back to Askewed Reviews. And as I'm doing so throughout the year, I'm going through the entire Disney animated collection. And today I'm doing the 1949 film, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Here is your trivia question for today. What character from this film would go on to be the inspiration for a future Disney character? The answer will be at the end of this episode. So this film is split up into two separate stories. The first story is Wind in the Willows. We meet a group of friends that consists of Rat, Mole, Badger, and their friend, Mr. Toad. Now, Toad is a free-spirited individual who pretty much listens to nobody but himself. And on this particular day, he's racing around town in a horse and buggy. That is, at least until he sees something that he's never seen before in person, and that happens to be a motor car. So Toad then develops motor mania, meaning that he wants a motor car more than anything else in the world. So he heads into the local pub to speak to the weasels, who appear to be the owners of the motor car, to see if there's any way he could purchase it from them. They say that they will only part with it if he is willing to trade over Toad Hall. And because he has motor mania, he does so. Now, unfortunately, the car does appear to be stolen, and Toad is now the one on trial for it, and even ends up going to prison because of it. And the worst part is apparently all of this was a plan of the mastermind of Mr. Winky, the owner of the pub, who is now the owner of Toad Hall. Now, Toad is able to escape prison and catch up with his friends Rat, Mole, and Badger, but can the four of them working together manage to sneak into Toad Hall, past the weasels, to Mr. Winky, and manage to sneak out with the deed? The second story is the legend of Sleepy Hollow. So in the town of Sleepy Hollow, we meet a few characters, including Brom Bones, Katrina Van Tassel, and a newcomer to the town, Ichabod Crane. So very quickly, Ichabod and Katrina seem to have feelings for each other. Now, unfortunately for Ichabod, Brom also has feelings for Katrina. So when a fall get-together occurs, Brom takes the opportunity to tell a scary ghost story about the Headless Horseman. Now, whether Brom does this just to try and scare Ichabod or because he has plans for later, we'll never know. But on Ichabod's way back home, as luck would have it, he does in fact run into the Headless Horseman. So will Ichabod make it back home safely? This film was the last of the segmented package films that Disney did during World War II. And there wouldn't be another one until 1977 with The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. The original title for the film was Two Fabulous Characters. I am definitely glad they changed that. The original plan for both of these segments were actually going to be full-length feature films, but due to the animator shortage during the war, they were shortened and added to one of the package films. Wind in the Willows is of course based off of the book of the same name, written by Kenneth Grahame. What's interesting is Grahame wrote another book called The Reluctant Dragon, which Disney previously also turned into a film, which ended up just being a segment of that film. Basil Rathbone was the narrator for the Wind in the Willows segment. The original plan was to have Jiminy Cricket do the narration for it, but they changed their mind. What's interesting is Rathbone does mention 4 other stories: King Arthur, Robin Hood, Sherlock Holmes, and Oliver Twist. Now, none of these stories actually appear in this film, but each one would get their own iteration from Disney, with The Sword and the Stone, Robin Hood, The Great Mouse Detective, and Oliver and Company. Apparently, the only character mentioned that doesn't get a Disney iteration is Becky Sharp, a character from the book Vanity Fair. Mr. Toad does actually make an appearance in a later Disney film called Mickey's Christmas Carol as that story's Fezziwig. Rat and Mole also show up in that film. The Weasel characters would show up from time to time in other Disney shorts, but would get a very prominent role in the 1988 film Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Some of the animation from this film, including the Weasel chase and when Brom is dancing, would be used again in The Jungle Book, specifically in the King Louie segment. This film inspired one of the longest running rides at Disneyland, which was Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. The Sleepy Hollow segment is based off of Washington Irving's story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Bing Crosby was the narrator for this segment. In almost every iteration of Sleepy Hollow, whether it be book, cartoon, or movies, it always varies on what connection Brom has to the Headless Horseman. Some of those connections are that 1, he is the Headless Horseman in disguise, 2, he's just the one telling the story of the Headless Horseman, or 3, he's the one who somehow summons the horseman into reality. Did you ever notice that technically in this story there is no hero, as Brom is a jerk and Ichabod is only after the Van Tassel fortune? Did you happen to know that Ichabod's horse has a name? Its name is Gunpowder, and in this film, Gunpowder is voiced by Clarence Nash, who is the voice of Donald Duck at this time. The Headless Horseman song is still considered one of the darkest songs for a Disney film. It was almost cut from the final version. The Headless Horseman is on a list of Disney villains that Disney still to this day will receive complaints about being too scary from parents. Some of the other characters on this list are Chernabog from Fantasia, the Horned King from The Black Cauldron, and the Firebird from Fantasia 2000. To save money on animation, the same model was used for Katrina Van Tassel that was used for Grace Martin from Make Mine Music and Slewfoot Sue from Melody Time. When they were first making the Haunted Mansion for Disney World, the original concept was to have this be connected to the story of the Headless Horseman, but eventually they decided against that. So when it comes to the film, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, these are two of my favorite Disney shorts. So I absolutely love this movie. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5. And now for the trivia question from the beginning of this episode. What character from this film would go on to be the inspiration for a future Disney character? So if you haven't already figured it out, the character of Brom Bones would actually go on to be the inspiration for Disney's version of Gaston in the 1991 film Beauty and the Beast. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews, and if there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments.